All right, peace, kings and queens. So, like I told you guys in class, part of the thing about being in seventh grade honors is that you guys are going to miss some of the things that we need to cover and discuss that you would in a regular seventh grade math class. So, we're going to go over integer operations and solving equations. If you look at my essential question, it says, how do I use integer operations to solve one and two step equations? So, the first thing that we're going to talk about, it says adding integers. So in order to add integers with the same sign, you have to add the values together, just like normal addition. So the sum is going to be positive if both integers are positive. They're going to be negative if both integers are negative. So if we look at part A, we have negative 2 plus negative 3. If we add those values together, we would get 5. And this is going to be negative because both of my integers are negative. So negative 2 plus negative 3 is going to be negative 5. It says to add integers with different signs, we want to subtract the values and take the sign of the larger number. So if we look at part B, I have 4 plus negative 6. Now if I subtract 4 minus 6, I'm left with 2. And then remember, I'm going to be left with the sign of the larger number, which is 6. So it's going to be negative 2. If you think about it on a number line, and I started with negative 6, negative 5, and negative 4, negative 3, negative 2, and so on. If I started at negative 6, and I wanted to add positive 4, it would jump to negative 2. So therefore my answer is negative 2. So I have to subtract 6 and 4 and take the sign of the larger number. Same thing for C. If I have negative 7 plus 10, 10 minus 7 is going to be 3. And since my larger number is 10, it's going to be positive. Okay, let's keep moving. If I look at subtracting integers, it says in order to subtract an integer, I have to add its opposite. So we're just going to add its opposite and then use the same rules that we had for addition. So if I had 6, all right, if I want to add the opposite, I'm going to add the opposite of 9. Okay? So 6 plus 9, I'm going to subtract these and I'm left with 3 and take the sign of the larger number. So I'm left with negative 3. So as a recap, I'm going to add its opposite. So I'm going to do, instead of 6 minus 9, I'm going to do 6 plus. The opposite of 9 is going to be negative 9. And just like we talked about before, above, when I have my addition rules, okay, in order to add two integers of different signs, I have to subtract the values and take the sign of the larger number. Okay? So if I look at part B and I have negative 10, all right, I'm going to add the opposite of that number. So that's simple. So I'm going to subtract 12 minus 10 is 2, and the sign of the larger number, 12, is positive. So I have positive 2. And last but not least, let's look at part C. C, I have negative 7 minus 8. So remember, if the integers are of the same sign, all we're going to do is add the numbers together and keep the sign. So I already know that my answer is going to be negative, and then 7, well, let's take that back a second. Let's go ahead and do negative 7 plus, and then the opposite of 8 would be negative 8. So since I'm adding integers of the same sign, I keep the sign and then add the numbers together. So I get negative 15. All right, I know I'm moving through this kind of quickly, but let's go ahead and just make sure that we are up to speed. If I look at multiplying and dividing integers, the first one says to multiply and divide a positive number with another positive number, it's going to end up being positive. It says in order to multiply or divide a negative number with another negative number, it's also going to end up being positive. And then the last one says multiplying and dividing a positive number with a negative number is going to result in a negative number. So let's look at part A. I have negative 6 times negative 4. So in order to do negative 6 times negative 4, both of them are negative, and step 2, or rule 2, tells me that a negative times a negative is going to end up being positive. So I'm going to have a positive number, and then 6 times 4 is going to be 24. If I look at part B, I have negative 8 plus 2, okay? Oh, excuse me, that actually says negative 8 divided by 2. It says to divide a negative number with a positive number is going to end up negative. So I already know this is going to be negative, and 8 divided by 2 is going to be 4. So my answer is negative 4. And last but not least, if I have C, 5 times negative 3, a positive times a negative number ends in, was going to end up being a negative number. So 5 times 3 is going to be 15, and my answer is going to be negative. So moving right along, if I look at the next page, remember we talked about how to solve these equations, but I know some of us need a little bit more practice. So if I look at the goal, it says the goal in solving equations is to isolate the variable using inverse operations. So if I look at that first problem, I have m plus 12 equals 10. So in order to isolate my variable, I have to get the variable by itself. So right now, 12 is being added to m. The inverse operation of addition is subtraction. So in order to solve this, I have to subtract 12 on both sides. Remember, when solving equations, what you do to one side, you must do to the other side. So I have m, 12 minus 12, those cancel out, equals, and then 10 minus 12 ends up being negative 2. Okay? Let's move right along to number 2. My variable in this case is g, and 9 is being subtracted from it. So the opposite addition, or the opposite operation is addition. So I need to add 9 to both sides. So I have g is equal to 7. All right, let's look at number 3. Number 3 says negative 7 times y equals negative 91. So as we know, the opposite operation of multiplication is division. So in order to do that problem, I have to do the opposite, which is division. So these are going to end up canceling, and then I get y equals, remember, a negative divided by a negative is a positive number. 7 goes into 91 13 times. So I get y equals positive 13. And last but not least, let's look at number 4. Number 4 says that a is being divided by 9. So in order to get that by itself, I need to multiply the entire thing by 9. If I multiply the first part by 9, they cancel. And I get a is equal to, but I still need to multiply that 9 by whatever's on the other side of my parentheses. So I get 9 times negative 4, which is negative 36. Still moving along, let's look at the next part. It says to get rid of a fraction, we have to multiply by the reciprocal. Now we should remember what a reciprocal is. It's just when we flip the numerator and the denominator of our fractions. So if I look at number 1, it says 2/3 x equals 10. So the reciprocal of 2/3 would be 3/2. All I did was switch my numerator and my denominator. And I'm going to multiply this entire thing by the reciprocal. So when I do that, it gets rid of my fractions. So then I get x is equal to 10 times 3 over 2, which equals 30 over 2, which equals 15. So now I want you guys to go ahead and try number 2, and then we're going to move on to the last part where it says solving a two-step equation. So we talked about this in class, and remember, in order to solve a two-step equation, I have 2 rules I need to follow. The first one is I have to undo addition and subtraction first to remove the constant term, that's the term that doesn't have a variable, and then I want to undo multiplication and division to remove the coefficient. The coefficient is the number that comes in front of my variable. So if I look at number one, I have 6x plus 8 equals 50. So to undo that, I have to subtract 8 from both sides. I'm undoing additional subtraction. Opposite of addition, subtraction. So I'm left with 6x equals 42. Part B says undo multiplication or division. So I have 6 times x. So instead of multiplying, I'm dividing. So x is going to be equal to 7. Now let's look at number 2. Number 2 says 13 equals negative 4x plus 9. So 9 is being added to negative 4x. So opposite of that is subtraction. So on this side, 13 minus 9 will leave me with 4 equals negative 4x. So now I have to undo multiplication or division. So negative 4 times x, I need to divide both sides by negative 4. So I'm going to be left with x is equal to negative 1. So now what I want you guys to do is to try 3 and 4. We're going to check that tomorrow in class. And then I want you guys to go ahead and write a summary on both sides of your paper. All right, I will be giving points for summaries tomorrow as well. So in order to get full credit, please make sure that you write down your summary. We talked about say, do, mean. What do my notes say? What procedures did I do? And what do my notes mean? What do my notes mean to me? All right, have a good evening.